Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon in the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you on this Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we're always happy to do this live stream to reach out to you, and not just the Americans, but everyone in the world, to talk about the issues that matter, to hear your voices, and to really look at what's happening in the world. And for those who are meeting us the first time, we do this every week. We want to thank you. We do long-form political commentary. And I look forward to hearing from your voices, whether you're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, DLive, or you can call into the show at 607-242-1582. Now, I think we're up. Okay. So it seems there was an immediate initial error from the internet. I'm checking on that as we speak. The internet overlords really have no great love for us on this program, but it looks like everything is back up and running as we speak at this moment, and we hope everyone can hear us properly. If you cannot, please do let us know. We want to make sure everyone's voice is going to be heard here today. With that said, let's get right on into it, folks. So, it's been quite a week, hasn't it? Seeing what's going on in Afghanistan. Women are being beaten. There's been shootings in front of the Kabul airport. We have many LGBTQ plus individuals are fearing for their lives, that at any moment they may have the Taliban banging down the doors and killing them. It is a horrible scenario. And that is only one of several things that are going on, because as the world has been laser focused on what's happening in Afghanistan and looking at the consequences of this, the breakdown of allies and the empowerment of enemies, while that's all been going on, the world kept going. American politics continued to move. The Biden administration, with its progressive ideals, continued to advance, which is terrifying. Which is absolutely terrifying. And I know a lot of people right now may be looking at football instead. They're looking for some form of entertainment to try and escape, to avoid having to deal with these issues. And quite honestly, it's not successful, because we know. Look at the local entertainment. What do you see? You see George Takei and Arnold Schwarzenegger telling you that you don't have any freedom, that you have to submit to their will, that their comfort levels are more important than your freedoms and your right to make a choice about your personal health care. What do we see that's been going on? We see in the United States, the Biden administration is looking for anything to desperately latch onto other than Afghanistan. They're trying to tell you about how you should be afraid of the pandemic, how you have to be terrified of it, how you have to listen to the experts, being the Biden administration, as they change almost weekly in some cases their viewpoints on what you should and shouldn't do, because you trust them, right? You trust them like you trust them to do the international policy, to take care of Americans, because that's what they're going to do. They're going to take care of Americans, like the 15,000 Americans lost somewhere in Afghanistan at this moment, with no guarantee. There have now been announcements from the Afghanistan embassy and telling Americans, don't come to the airport. Well, how are they getting out of the country? You told them to go to the airport. You told the American people that it was secure, that the one spot in Afghanistan that the American government absolutely had control over was the airport and the entrance into that airport, so that American citizens could go through and get home. They could be safe. And what do we see? That's not true. None of that is true. And everything is getting much, much worse. By the way, folks, I'm not sure. It looks like we are not on Twitter at the moment, which means we may have been blocked or suspended. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we're on Facebook. or YouTube at this moment. I believe YouTube is up. But it's hard to tell sometimes because the internet overlords don't really like this channel. They don't like you having a conversation. They don't like the fact that we reach out around the world and that we have people in the United Kingdom, in Germany, in India, in Peru, in Canada, as well as across the United States itself that watch this program. They don't like that. They don't want you to have a voice. They don't want you to speak up. They just want you to obey. They want you to do what you are told. No more and absolutely no less. Just do what you're told and do not question, do not ask, do not think. That's something that we on this program disagree with entirely. Now, there's a lot of things we want to go over today with you. And there's a lot of issues that we want to discuss. And obviously, we're going to be talking about what happened in Afghanistan. We will, the further consequences, the further breakdown, the more and more money that is lost and potentially the lives that are going to be lost. But first, we want to deal with something else. We want to look at a couple of other things that are going on right now. Let's take a look at what happened this week on August 19th, 3 days ago. Secretary Anthony Blinken came out, United States official, and he said, we are imposing further sanctions on senior Cuban officials and the head of Cuba's prison system, where protesters unjustly imprisoned face abuse and abysmal conditions. We will continue to promote accountability for the Cuban regime's violence and violations of human rights. That's really interesting, that the United States government is now finally taking a stance after a month of the Cuban people protesting communism. They finally decided, hey, we should probably talk about that. We should probably try and defend those people, which is kind of interesting and humorous to an extent, given what the United States government did. When we first heard about those protesters, well, we heard, silence initially from the self-avowed communists in the United States, Senator Bernie Sanders. He said nothing. He had nothing to say about it. AOC said, don't you understand? It's all about not communism. It's not about socialism. It's about the United States. The United States is what caused the people to protest. It's the reason why people are upset. You didn't hear Michael Moore talking about, hey, what's going on in Cuba? Why are the Cuban people revolting against this wonderful government, according to Michael Moore and his documentary? Well, what it turns out is it isn't so great. And Cuba is an oppressive regime. It denies people their rights and their freedoms. And finally, the United States has stepped up and said, hey, we have to speak about this. This is wrong. You should give that up. You should stop. Because it's not about the United States having done something to Cuba. It's the Cuban government that is doing something to the people. Just like what we see in Venezuela. Just like we have seen around the world everywhere that socialism has taken hold. Now, I bring that up for a very specific reason. I want to talk about Cuba for a specific reason because the United States government now is standing up. Finally, they finally took their place to say, this is wrong. It's not about America's fault. It's the government, the socialist government of Cuba is oppressing its people. They are putting them into jails and people are disappearing, and that is wrong. In fact, that's also what we hear from Amnesty International. Also, 3 days ago, Cuba Amnesty International names prisoners of conscience amidst crackdown on protesters. They're talking about the fact that the Cuban government made people disappear forever, especially as the world turned its attention away from Cuba and to Afghanistan. As the rest of the world is looking at what's going on with China and Taiwan, and the fact that Taiwan is telling China is telling the Taiwanese people that if you're relying on the United States, if you're thinking the United States is your ally and they will back you up, you are sadly mistaken. a statement that was later confirmed by the White House itself on Thursday. Yes, the White House itself actually came out and made the announcement and said, no, the United States doesn't really have a position with Taiwan. We're not going to tell the Taiwanese people that we would actually defend them like NATO, like we would defend Japan. Terrifying. So while the world was looking at that and we turned away our eyes from Cuba, Cuba decided to make people disappear. Numbers are somewhere around 140 people disappeared. Now, I bring that up because you know what else disappeared? You know what else is going on? And this is from the Washington Post. And this came out on the Washington Post on July 29th. Did you hear about this? D.C. jail officials turn away GOP members of Congress, who showed up to check on January 6th suspects. These people have been locked away and no one is able to see them. Even their attorneys are not able. They are limited in being able to meet up with these individuals. These are American citizens who have been put away for months. Many of them have been locked up since January without a trial. And they haven't done anything. And we have members of Congress looking after American citizens, and they're saying, let's see these people because they may not be treated well, that there are reports that they are being beaten, that they are living in substandard conditions. All this while they are being held without a trial. In fact, it was, I believe it was either Paul Gosar or Louis Gohmert who said, I believe it was Louis Gohmert who likened this to a political prisoner. This is similar to what we saw of what's going on in Cuba, where people have just disappeared. 535 Americans were arrested because of the protests on January 6th. And they were demonized. They were labeled by the left-leaning media, as being the absolute worst of the worst of the worst. And that's just wrong. Hang on a second. My voice is a little high. And it's terrifying that these individuals were labeled as the worst of the worst, that they were absolute demons, that they were absolutely terrible, that they committed atrocities. By the way, I want to remind you, you want to see an atrocity? You want to see something that was absolutely terrifying? That's an insurrection. What you're seeing on the screen right now, that's an insurrection. You know what? Black Lives Matter, that's an insurrection. Autonomous zones, that's an insurrection. The Taliban, that's an insurrection. You know what's not so much of an insurrection? That guy howling at just screaming at the top of his lungs while an officer is in front of them asking them to leave peacefully. That American citizens could protest their government, yes, aggressively protesting it. Yes, they entered without permission. They broke into a building. Absolutely, that is a crime. By the way, it's not a crime if you're an illegal alien. If you break into America through the southern border, Democrats are willing to forgive you for that. They will let you go through, and it's perfectly okay. Hi, Christina. It's good to see you. And yes, I always love broadcasting. I love being here every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. But as I mentioned, and Christina, you can tell me if you know about this. Have you heard about the 535 Americans at least, and some numbers are over 600, that have been arrested in conjunction to January 6th? Did you know that there are many of these people who are still in jail at this moment and have not received a trial? Did you know that members of Congress were not allowed to be able to see these people as they're being held in the D.C. jail? And many of these people, their only crime for many of these people, for hundreds of these people, is they entered the Capitol building. That's their crime. They entered the Capitol building. And you know what? Democrats are absolutely demonizing them. What about the people on the southern border? 1.1 million people that we know of crossed the United States border, entered our nation without permission. They are destroying our economy. They cost us money. It is a fact. It is a fact that many of these people had COVID and were shipped out across the United States with COVID. But Democrats are telling you you cannot pick on them. You cannot be upset with them. That's perfectly okay. Having an open border is perfectly okay. Being an illegal alien and running around the United States with COVID, that's okay. But an American citizen walking into the American Capitol, that is treason. That's high treason. These people should be locked away for life, according to the Democrats. That doesn't seem to make any sense. And of course, at the end of the show, you're going to be able to see links for everything that we're talking about. But, again, I will say, Black Lives Matters. Their goals are to destroy the United States government, to replace our democracy with a socialist regime. That is insurrectionist. Autonomous zones like we saw in Seattle, in Austin, in Colorado, in New York City. They violate every local, state, and federal law. That is an insurrection by its definition. The Taliban are insurrectionists by definition. But we're told that these people are absolutely insurrectionists. Well, here's the Washingtonian. And they had their article on August 12th, which you probably did not see, which you probably did not hear about. The accused January 6 rioters complain about conditions in the D.C. jail, that they are being treated in a substandard system. In particular, one of the individuals, Richard Bennett, he's been accused. He was the guy who had his foot on Nancy Pelosi's desk. Barrett was arrested on January 8th, 2 days after January 6th. He pled not guilty on all counts. He spent 109 days in detention. 109 days, over 3 months. They sent out messages. He was sending messages to Amnesty International and the American Civil Liberties Union, or the ACLU, to be able to take on his story, to back up his rights. These are the same people who are more than happy to scream about Cuba and to denounce the United States government. That's Amnesty International. But for these American citizens who were held, in this case, 109 days straight without getting a trial, because a photographer asked him to put his foot on Nancy Pelosi's desk. Yes, did he break and enter? Absolutely. Should he be punished for that? Absolutely. But his crime of putting his foot on Nancy Pelosi's desk got him locked up for 109 days without representation. Then there's Dominic Pezzola, excuse me, I mispronounced his last name, who had the horrible, horrible fact of being a member of the Proud Boys. How dare he? Such a terrible thing. Because we know the Proud Boys, they created autonomous zones, right? No, not one. The Proud Boys, what did they do? Did they kill American citizens? No, that were members of Antifa and BLM. Over a dozen of them across the United States from June of 2020 until just a couple of months ago. Well, the Proud Boys, they're the ones who were doing drive-by shootings. No, that was in George Floyd Square, an autonomous zone that existed for more than a year, which was created by BLM and Antifa. What did the Proud Boys do? They got in fights with Antifa. Yes, that is criminal, but not the same thing. That's not a terrorist action. Taking over a city is. And by the way, I'm fully aware, and I believe that, I've seen YouTube's warnings The last time we were talking about this, the American elections, we were talking about American healthcare. Guess what? The YouTube and some of the other social giants, we got suspended. We had our videos deleted. So we are imminently aware that we may be removed at any moment. The reason why we can't see if anyone, at this moment, we can't see if anyone is watching this video, which is strange because we usually have dozens every week, even during football season. So in fact, it looks like my signal's being cut. Yeah, I just saw that. So we may see, there may be games going on by social media because they don't want you to have this conversation. To actually consider the fact that these people are being maltreated in our prisons and no one wants to talk about it. The news media isn't sharing this story with you. You can't talk about this. It's like the Arizona recount. You can't talk about it. I literally was, this channel was shut down for 7 days because we dared quote the national news media, the credible national news media, about a story that was going on in the United States. And because we mentioned it, because we talked about what was happening in Arizona as it was being reported by the news every night, they shut us down for 7 days. Silenced us and removed the video because we can't even quote the news. Here I am, I'm talking about the DC rioters or protesters from January 6th. I'm telling you that people have been put into jail, which is not being shared widespread by the news media. It is being downplayed and not being allowed to be talked about. Members of Congress have been denied the ability to speak to their constituents and American citizens. And you can't talk about that. And I'm watching this channel get messed with as we speak live. You should be upset. Vic mentions, America is no longer to be trusted under Democrats, only our money and handouts. I don't know. See, I'm glad to see that you're there, and I don't think Christina left us, and I don't think you've left us, Vic, but right now, according to what the internet overlords are sending us, no one's seeing this, so you guys can't see this. Please speak up. Let them know they cannot silence you, because I think this is something that's worth being discussed. I think this is important. I think this is absolutely important because the ramifications are deadly. When I say that, I mean, look at this. This is a story for NBC. It's a story that has, it's been spoken about somewhat on the right, somewhat on the left, as you can see from NewsGuard. Capitol police officer who shot Ashley Babbitt exonerated in internal probe. Here's a very interesting question about this. Do you know the name of the Capitol police officer who shot Ashley Babbitt? I'll make it even easier for you. Do you know the color of skin of the Capitol police officer who shot Ashley Babbitt? Because at the time, on January 6th, we showed you video of her being shot. Ashley Babbitt was not armed. Ashley Babbitt was a member of the United States Air Force. She was an American citizen and a proud member of our military, and she was randomly picked out and shot. Not because she was an aggressor, not because she destroyed anything, not because she was armed with a weapon. Literally, you can see the video, which I can't show you now, otherwise this channel will be wiped out. But you can see in the original video that one of the Capitol Police sticks a gun outside of a door into a hallway and shoots. And Ashley Babbitt goes down. And we don't know who that person is. And this man has been exonerated. To quote NBC News on August 20th, 2 days ago, the officer whose name has not been released, I wonder why. Why not? Opened fire on Babbitt as she and a mob of other Trump supporters tried to forcefully enter the Capitol. They were already in the Capitol. They weren't trying to forcefully in. They were going into another part of the Capitol, but they had already entered. And they didn't forcefully enter, but they did enter. Video of the shooting showed Babbitt in front of a crowd. Actually, she was in the middle of a crowd because I've seen the video. I've shown the video on this channel before. She was in the middle of a crowd, not in the front, of rioters trying to get through a door leading to where members of Congress were being evacuated on the House side of the building. By the way, the door, just to be very, very clear here, I want to be very clear. It wasn't like, here's the door, on this side are the protesters, on the other side are members of Congress. That's not true. The room had already been evacuated, but more importantly, the room that they were trying to get into was not the floor of Congress. They were going into another room that was getting closer to the members of Congress, to the members of the House of Representatives. They were getting closer to them, but that wasn't the room they were entering. So NBC is misrepresenting because they expect you to not know the geography that they're speaking about. They want you to get this feeling that these people were imminently about to attack members of Congress who weren't there because they had already been evacuated and they were not near. They're misrepresenting facts that exist on video and in the geography of the Capitol building because they have an agenda here. But again, let me ask you this question, and I'm going to get to some of the comments in a second. Why won't they tell you who is the Capitol Police officer? When you see that, you know who shot George Floyd, right? You know who was the officer involved with Michael Brown, right? How many cases do I need to go through where the news media was absolutely adamant about making sure they told you the name of the officer? Hell, in some cases, they tried to give you their addresses. But this Capitol Police officer, no, he's protected. That man is protected, and we can't speak to them. We can't have an interview with them. We cannot find out what the testimony was about why he decided to suddenly pull out a gun and make one single shot. The only person who died on January 6th was Ashley Babbitt. That is a fact. And the fact checkers can go crazy on Facebook and YouTube all you want. Nothing I have said so far, and nothing I have said is a derivation of the facts. These are the facts as we saw them live and as were reported by every news media agency. The only person who died on January 6th was Ashley Babbitt. That was the only bullet, that was the only gunshot that was made. And that was by a Capitol Police officer. And if there was this massive crowd, if he was so terrified about all of this, this group coming in, then let me ask you, why was there only one shot to a woman in the middle of a crowd? Why didn't he shoot the person right in front at the very door? Individuals who are at that door, right in front of them. Why did they shoot into the room and not at the person right in front of them? Why did they target her? Why is she the only person who shot? If they were so worried about an imminent breakthrough, why didn't they shoot again? There were in that room at that time, according to video evidence that exists, there were at least 2 people in that hallway. If they thought they were going to get overrun, wouldn't you think they would shoot more than once? See, these are questions that I have. And these are questions that I would expect the news media to answer, especially that we've had 7 months to answer them. And yet, we don't get told any of this. NBC News didn't have any reason to ask these questions. Why should you wonder why she was shot in the middle of a crowd? Why was she the only one who was shot? Why didn't they shoot someone who is closer to the door? Who did the shooting? Why did that person pick her? What was the evidence? Why is it that this officer is being exonerated without any questions, without any follow-up, and had already been exonerated back in April, making this current case, this current decision, moot. They were never going to be. And let me make sure you understand that. The Justice Department announced in April that no charges were being brought against the officer. The exoneration by the Capitol Police wraps up the last remaining investigation into the incident. This was already a foregone conclusion. It was never a question. This officer was never going to be questioned. This officer was never going to be brought before a judge. There was never going to be an incident, a chance of this getting any bigger, that the American people would find out anything more. It was already decided back in April. The Justice Department already said, nope, we're washing our hands of this. It's done. And I'm not going to tell you that Ashley Babbitt was a perfect person. I will tell you that she was an Air Force veteran. I will tell you that she was amongst a crowd of 24 people. I will tell you that she was in the middle of the crowd according to the video evidence that we were able to see at the moment that she was shot. These are things I can tell you. But I want to understand, why can't I find out the other details? Why will the American people not be told this? Why did this end on April when the Justice Department said, no more questions, this is done? Meanwhile, we have 535 American citizens, at least 535 American citizens that we know of, that have been thrown into jails for hundreds of days under poor conditions at the best, that members of Congress cannot speak to, cannot check on them, cannot determine how they are doing. Meanwhile, Amnesty International, which loves to demonize the United States, is out here left-leaning, and they don't even want to talk about it. They don't even want to look into this. They will not even respond when they have directly been requested to talk about it. So Karen mentioned, and Karen, thank you for joining us. Very happy to see you here. Karen says, which is amazing because according to my system right now, the internet overlords are telling me no one else exists right now. Meanwhile, we're getting comments. Karen says, we should be upset. We should be very upset. I think we should be absolutely upset. Christina says that she can see this, but it's glitching. And I'm telling you that that's coming from the other side. That's coming from the internet overlords. Bojo mentions, hello, Bojo. Things will only get worse. And I'm afraid, Bojo, you're going to be right. Dow, you're with us. Okay. It was visible in the same video evidence that she was unarmed, that the shot was committed to without properly identifying whether the target was armed or not, nor was there a warning. I understand. This is all true. The video evidence exists out there if you can find it. And by the way, I would love to again show it to you, but my channel is already under warnings from YouTube and Facebook. And they're already threatening to silence us and to cut us out. We've all, as was mentioned by Karen, we're already experiencing glitching from a show. We do this every week. Our technology has not changed. So I tend to believe that they're trying to do something. And this is going on, yes, I understand. This week, we've been talking about Afghanistan. Actually, on this show, we've been talking about international policy, the foreign policy of the Biden-Harris administration since January 21st. We were one of the first to talk about the moving of troops into Syria, creating a more unstable Middle East. We've had over 15, 16 different episodes at least purely dedicated to the foreign policy of the Biden administration and how it is going wrong and how Iran is being empowered. But in this last week, I understand a lot of people we've been paying attention to Afghanistan because there are 15,000 Americans that are in harm's way. So I get it. But at the same time, throughout all of this, before any of this happened, There are over 500 American citizens, possibly 600, possibly even more, that are languishing in jails, many of them, without ever receiving a trial, being accused of the absolute worst things you could possibly do, being accused of treason against the United States government for doing things that illegal aliens do in the millions every day and are excused by Democrats. When we see individuals like the protesters, the rioters, the insurrectionists at George Floyd Square, at the Chaz, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, the Autonomous Zone in Atlanta, in Austin. These people were all excused. In fact, Representative Jerry Nadler, when he was asked, well, does this Antifa exist? Are they actually creating these autonomous zones? He's like, no, it's not true. It doesn't exist. Don't know what you're talking about. It's not true. Meanwhile, they're killing American citizens. Do you not remember the 8-year-old child that died in Atlanta? The 16-year-old that died in Portland? The man that was literally targeted by an Antifa member who walked up to him and shot him in cold blood. David Dorn laying on the ground. And there are so many more. Jessica Dottie Whitaker, a mom, killed. Why? She said all lives matter, and they killed her. But these are people that the far left, that members of Congress, the Democrats, the progressives, they will forgive them. That's that's okay. But Ashley Babbitt gets killed, and you know what? They're all demons. They're worst things that ever existed in America. That's got to trouble you, doesn't it? From a government, and I'm going to get to the comments, Gareth, and I'm going to mention your comments. But when you put this into context, that we have the Biden administration, a man who bumbles through his conversations so badly so that literally ABC News is editing his words. They're literally chopping up what he's saying. They're literally taking the middle of his sentences and they are editing them out so you, the American people, cannot see them because that makes him sound more coherent and competent. So we have a man who is so incompetent that he can't make a sentence without it being edited by the news media in secret. He doesn't know what's going on in our nation. And he has made plans so irresponsible that 15,000 Americans today are sitting in Afghanistan trying to hide from the Taliban and ISIS who are trying to kill them. And they have no confidence. There is zero confidence that the United States government under the Biden administration will actually go and get them. The British commandos went in, they parachuted into Kabul, and they're rounding up British citizens as we speak. The French special forces went into Kabul, they're rounding up French citizens as we speak and getting them out of that country. The American government is sitting there saying, we don't know that we can get outside of an airport. And we don't know if we can get to American citizens, and they are telling the American embassy in Kabul, in Afghanistan, are telling American citizens, don't come to the airport, the only way out of the country. When we have a government that's that incompetent, and that same leadership of this country that is that incompetent is at the same time telling you, oh, by the way, we don't like these Americans who have a political preference that is different than ours. And they did a lesser crime than what any of the crimes I've just mentioned being done by Democrats, BLM, Antifa, Citizen Action, Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, Truth Farm. They are all members of the splinter group, the far left. They are all Democrats in the Democratic Party, and they want to beat up on American citizens. Doesn't that make you question what is going on? And if you don't, please let me know. If you think I'm wrong, you can see Dal, Ann, Garrett, people are speaking. I want to hear your voice. I'm not telling you I have the only voice. I'm not telling you that I'm the only person who could possibly be right. I am asking you a question. Does this not make you uneasy? I'm asking you to tell me what you think. And if you are on the left, if you're a progressive, even if you're an independent and you're watching this saying, I didn't know that, what do you think now? Now that you do know, now that you have been asked this question, to put it into context, what do you think? Let me get to the comments. Gareth had said, late to get here. Nope, Gareth, you're never late. I'm glad you are here. It is true 3 Capitol Police officers involved that day have committed suicide. Yes, Gareth, it is correct. Several officers have committed suicide. Not sure it's true, but it seems to, he seems to remember it. Yes, Gareth, it is correct that there have been 3 Capitol Police officers, or I don't believe they were all Capitol Police officers, but 3 officers who were involved with the January 6th riot have committed suicide. None of them were killed. And if you remember, we were initially misrepresented. The news media misreported and told us, oh no, these were people who were killed. No, they weren't. That they were beat over the heads with trash cans. Never happened. Again, we have a news media that is working with certain politicians that are more than happy to exaggerate their enemies' situations and to blow them up into these massively, incredibly horrible situations that never happened, that did not exist, just so they can demonize them for the political benefit. And yet I am quoting you, and I have been showing you, and you can go back to June 2020 and follow my coverage. Just go to the channel, No Soundbites Allowed, or any of the other channels that we're on. Type in BLM or Antifa, or type in Autonomous Zone, and you will see coverage, hours upon hours of coverage of locations across the United States where these far left individuals did absolutely devastating things to America under the message of destroying the United States government. BLM doesn't want the United States to remain the country it is. They want to fundamentally change it. Kind of like President Obama. He wanted to create a transformation of America. He just never told you what he wanted to transform it into. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez blatantly tells you she is a democratic socialist and wants to change America. She wants to reform America. She wants socialism. Bernie Sanders is absolutely blatantly honest when he tells you he is a communist. He wants a communist government. These are people who are not interested in the Constitution or the amendments or the Declaration of Independence. They want to get rid of that. They want to rewrite it. How many times have you heard the members of Congress and members of the Democratic Party, the progressives, say they want to rewrite the Second Amendment? They want to invalidate that they believe in human rights, the rights that men and human beings give each other, not absolute rights that are inalienable and cannot be taken away. So when you put it into context and understand, we have a failure of a president, and there is no other way to say that. And I understand. They keep wanting to blame. You can't see anything happening in Afghanistan without somehow the left-leaning media has to bring up Donald Trump's name. They have to invoke his name. They have to say, Trump, he kind of, if they mention Trump, they're also almost always going to try and invoke Bush's name. President George Bush, G.W. Bush. And leave out the big swath of time that was dedicated to Obama with Vice President Biden involved, doing exactly the same thing everyone else did, except that Trump actually made a plan with conditions that never got followed. Biden threw it all out the window. New York Times reported in April, he didn't care what the plan was. He didn't care what the CIA and what his generals were telling him about keeping 2,500 individuals there. Even in the George Stephanopoulos ABC News, even as they edited the video, Stephanopoulos says, it was your own intelligence agency generals were telling you, don't do it this way. Don't just run away. And Biden's like, well, no one ever said that. No one ever said that. Even though it was reported by the major news media, it was in the New York Times. George Stephanopoulos knows it. don't worry about that. That's just not true. Because we're going to rewrite history. And this is a government we're supposed to trust. This is a government we're supposed to trust as 535 members of America are sitting in D.C. jail with no one representing them and no one able to see them and not being able to speak with them or speak to their lawyers. And we're supposed to say, well, that's okay, because I trust that. I trust that Joe Biden, that he can remember his own name. So obviously he must be able to know what's going on with these people. That the same Democrats that have demonized these people, well, it must be okay, because those same Democrats, that same Democratic Party that told us that this was an absolute insurrection, I'm going to get to the comments in 1 second. Those same people, remember, those same Democrats were telling us it's an insurrection. This was coordinated. This was a plan. You know what? This is the Independent. The Independent is a left-leaning news organization. NewsGuard confirms it. The major news media, the left-leaning news media, does not want to tell you, 14%, they don't want to tell you that this wasn't an insurrection. The FBI did the investigations. It wasn't an insurrection. There was no plan. There was no coordinated effort to destroy America. You don't believe in the Independent, which is a left-leaning source? How about we go to Reuters? Reuters is absolutely neutral. And again, 14% of the left are telling people what Reuters found, which is that the FBI finds scant evidence that the U.S. Capitol attack was coordinated. This wasn't a coordinated action. This was not an attempt to take over America. The evidence is there. Republicans are trying to tell you, but the left is going to say, well, that's what the Republicans have always been saying. This is what the FBI is saying. This is the latest news. So it seems that all of these American prisoners that are being denied the ability to see, members of Congress are being denied the ability to see American citizens for something that they were accused of doing, which is an insurrection that did not happen. Aren't you concerned? I'm not telling you that you have to agree with me. Are you not concerned that this doesn't add up? And if you think it does, please correct me. Tell me where I am wrong. I want to hear your thoughts. Let me go back to the comments. So, Anfield had mentioned that they are political prisoners. By the way, Ann, PolitiFact has decided that we are wrong, that you are wrong, that Louis Gohmert is wrong. Congressman Louis Gohmert is incorrect, that they are not political prisoners. And goes on to say that this is just like the Soviet Union had political prisoners. You might want to, as I was mentioning earlier in the show, comparing it to Cuba. And the way Cuba is treating its political people who don't agree with the political position of the socialist government of Cuba, that the now Secretary Anthony Blinken is complaining about, that now Amnesty International is complaining about, but they will not complain about. In fact, they will not even discuss. They will not even respond to the American citizens being held in D.C. jail, some of them for 4 or 5 months without a trial. Again, I will say it, 4 or 5 months without a trial. By the way, tell me if anyone remembers this. Do you remember that during 2020 COVID, New York State released prisoners from jail because of COVID? Do you remember that it was just, a month and a half ago, that the Manhattan DA waved away, just ignored, just destroyed, removed 3,000 arrests by BLM and Antifa members, and took their crimes and just threw them out the window and said it never happened? Does this sound like it's equivalent? But let me get back to, so when you say they're not political prisoners, they seem to be, because their politics are the reason why they're still stuck in a prison while we are releasing people because of COVID. We're releasing people because they committed a riot. There's people who were rioting in Rochester, in my local community. An individual, I don't want to even mention his name, but it's a public record, arrested for rioting in the second degree. That was waived. It was gone. He helped to destroy property and was rioting in Rochester, destroying the public peace, antagonizing American citizens who were peacefully sitting down for their dinner. He got arrested for rioting in the second degree, and that, poof, just disappeared. The charge just went away because he's a member of the left, the far left. But meanwhile, the January 6th protesters are sitting, languishing in a jail for 4 or 5 months now, and no one can speak to them. Tell me, how does that not sound like a political prisoner? But let me get back to the comments because I'm just going off. I'm upset. Gareth mentions that nothing surprises me. I was born in the Vietnam era. What has changed? Well, looking at the Vietnam era, not much for Joe Biden because he decided to take a trip back, and that's Afghanistan. He literally repeated exactly what happened in Saigon in 1975, in Afghanistan, in Kabul in 2021. Susan speaks with us, and she says, by the way, Susanna, good to see you here. I don't believe I've seen you here before. I was not ignoring you. Just takes me a moment to catch up sometimes. Thank you for joining us today. Susanna says, vaccines contain mercury, formaldehyde. She mentions various ingredients. Salem News in 1976, vaccine Jonas Salk admitted Congress. I can't, just so you know, Susanna, I cannot discuss what's in or not in a vaccine, or the live feed will be cut. My channel will be removed. I can't discuss what's in the vaccines. I can only go by what is being reported today, not 1976, what is being reported today about their efficacy. And even then, just like I mentioned before, if you're not aware, Susanna, we were put onto a suspension. We had videos removed for quoting the major news media. And the fact that we've been quoting major news media about the January 6th protesters may in fact have this channel removed because we're quoting the news that exists and asking a question. And it seems that the internet overlords don't like that. Dow mentions that he saw a report that Osama bin Laden recognized how valuable Biden was as a domestic-based weapons of mass destruction that could be the special weapon to defeat America from the inside. I don't know that I would say that. I do not believe that Joe Biden would knowingly try and destroy America. I don't know that he knows better. I don't know that he is aware of the consequences of his actions. He doesn't realize that in abandoning both 15,000 Americans and our allies, we're talking about France, we're talking about Australia, we're talking about the United Kingdom, when you abandon them, as well as the Afghani people, well, that has a repercussion with the people in Taiwan who are wondering, well, isn't the United States supposed to back us up? What about our friends in Japan? What about in South Korea? What about, and pick a spot in the world where the United States has said, we will help defend you, we will protect you, that we are the good guys, and you can trust us. And now every single one of them, every ally we have in NATO, every nation in the world is questioning, can we trust the Americans under Biden? Is Biden aware enough to know whether or not he's going to come to our help? Or is he going to just leave us in the middle of the night, like they did to the Afghani people? See, I don't know that, Dal, I don't know that he understands what he has done and the consequences that it means for the world. But Dow goes on to say that bin Laden believed in it so much that he stopped an assassination plan, stated, I have not heard that there was an assassination plan against then Vice President Biden. I had never heard of that. But I would love to see that, because I don't remember it, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen. I would love to see the source, because I would love to look into that. Gareth mentions the coordinated effort by media is the most dangerous insurrection we have, and it's going to be on forever. Well, yeah, they're going to continue to keep going. They're not stopping. They are definitely not stopping. Just as we have shown you that they were more than happy to put out the news and tell you that the Capitol Police officer exonerated, even though he was already exonerated from back in April. That this was a known fact. It was already going to happen, otherwise known as a kangaroo court. And I want to go into this a little bit, because you can also go to the Post-Millennial, which also discussed this with a slightly different take on what happened. They mentioned, and I'm quoting part of the article, the cop, whose name still has not been released, opened fire on the 35-year-old as she and other Trump supporters tried to enter the Capitol. Again, they were already in the Capitol. They were trying to get in further into the building. Viral video of the fatal shooting showed Babbitt in front of a crowd of rioters. She was in the center of a group of them, who had gained access to a hallway outside the Speaker's lobby, which leads to the House chamber. Again, they weren't in the House, and all of the members of Congress had already been evacuated. On the federal level, the Justice Department announced back in April no charges were to be brought against the Capitol Police officer. The exoneration by the Capitol Police concludes the investigations. It's all said and done. And I want you to understand that the Department of Justice found that the federal investigation did not find evidence to, quote, establish beyond a reasonable doubt that the officer had violated any federal laws, and there was nothing to contradict that he believed it was necessary to shoot at Babbitt, quote, in self-defense or in defense of members of Congress and others evacuating the House chamber. So other people were evacuating. They were already out. There was no one was armed. Not one person was armed at that moment. Everyone who was trying to get in, Ashley Babbitt and the others, no one was armed. And there was no one looking like they were armed in front of the Speaker's lobby when Ashley Babbitt was shot. Now, there were a lot of people. Yes, they were loud, angry, and shouting, but there's no weapons. So why shoot to kill? See, there's the thing I want to bring up. Why did he, it looked like to me, the first time I saw the video, he shot randomly into the crowd, that he wasn't actually even aiming for Ashley Babbitt. He just shot into the crowd just to hit anyone, to make a point. But here's the thing. If you are a Capitol Police officer, you don't fire a warning shot. There are no individuals who are armed. You don't know what their intent is. Why did you not shoot Ashley Babbitt in the leg? Why did you not shoot any of the other individuals in a leg? Why was no one else shot except Ashley Babbitt only one time in that moment? If the threat was so severe that you thought they were to imminently break into the Speaker's lobby and that you were about to be overrun by individuals who are not armed with questionable, at that moment, I'll give it to you, questionable motivations, then why not shoot someone in the leg? Why not shoot several people in the leg? This is your warning shot. This is to let you do not go further. Do not continue. Shoot them in the leg. This stops the people. This stops the momentum of that mob, that crowd. Why not do that? Why is deadly force the first and only thing that is being done at that moment? See, this is the thing I want you to think about, folks, because you don't have to agree with me. You can tell me that there is that the rioters on January 6th, the protesters, that they were insurrectionists. If you want to think that, that's perfectly fine. The FBI does not agree with you. The FBI will tell you that you are wrong. Doesn't matter. Okay, you believe that they are insurrectionists. You believe what the Democratic Socialists of America believe, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. You believe that even though she was nowhere near there, that there was no one who was even close to her, that she was in danger, that she was going to be raped and killed. Okay, if you want to believe that, and that's the case, then let's understand something. There are rules on using deadly force. Police officers don't just get to shoot people. By the way, these are the same police officers that the Democrats hate. See, the Democrats don't want police officers. They don't like police officers. They hate police officers. They're trying to defund the police across the nation. They want to instill that as part of federal law. They want to defund police everywhere, except for the Capitol Police. Because the Capitol Police, which answer to Nancy Pelosi, not to the federal government, the executive branch, not to the local departments of government, they answer to Congress, which means Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. And they are expanding. Think about it. The rest of Congress, all the Democrats are saying they're being pushed to, and they are agreeing with, defunding the police, except for Nancy Pelosi's Capitol Police, which are expanding into the 50 states that they have no purpose or jurisdiction in at all. And it is those same exact Capitol Police who are now being exonerated without having to answer the question, why did you use deadly force? Why is the only action you took using deadly force? You don't have to agree with me. You don't have to agree with my conclusion. But like Christina is saying, it doesn't add up. I don't understand this. It doesn't make sense. Does this make sense to you folks? Does it make sense to you? Do you think that that's right? Dow mentions, correction, the plans for assassination were to focus on Obama and Petraeus, General Petraeus, who was in charge at that time, because Biden was identified as unprepared to assume the presidency and would lead to U.S. into a crisis, so was to be ignored. Okay, well, that makes some sense. Because I agree, Biden is absolutely useless. And I'm trying to look at this right now, and I'm with you folks. This looks like it is a New York Times article out of the Asia Pacific by John Cushman on March 12th of 2012. Bin Laden plot against Obama outlined in documents. That is the New York Times. Okay. So I'm telling you folks, but I'm asking you, and I'm only asking you simple questions that you should ask yourself. The police are not inherently authorized to use deadly force. That is a fact. That is one of the reasons why you see BLM, Antifa, Plot, the Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, the Truth Farm, Citizen Action, the far left. They lose their minds and they're having protests demanding that we defund police because they don't agree with the use of force, even non-lethal force. So why is the Capitol Police their only action that they took that day? The only thing they did to these protesters is they shot and killed Ashley Babbitt without a warning shot. Why? And why is that officer exonerated without the public having the ability to ask a single question? Why is the news media not asking a single question? You don't have to agree with me, but you should ask the question. Our news media, which we are part of, should ask this question. There should be an answer for that. I don't say you have to agree with the answer. You don't have to believe the answer necessarily, but there should be an answer that we can evaluate. Not a cover-up. Susanna mentions that everyone who is vaccinated, she's mentioning vaccines. I'm not familiar with Dr. Shiv Chopra or what he had mentioned in Canada. So I can't speak about that, Susanna. But I want you to understand something, folks. This is the far left. Andy Ngo, who is a member of the press, he's a New York Times bestselling author, presents to us something that was caught from John Austin. This is Anna Kochakian, a known far-left feminist, third-wave feminist, who decides that she wanted to go out and destroy the memorial to slain Chicago police officer Ella French. Destruction of property, and quite immoral, quite honestly. Democrats are perfectly happy with that. In fact, if you try to look this up, and I did it for you, and I'm going to update it right here with you live. I just updated it. Anna Kochorkian, gender studies major, destroys a memorial. That's from the TB Daily News, not a major source. There's her LinkedIn. MidwestSocialist.com. Do you think there's a bias in that? She's an author. Do you see? Feminist accountability, disrupting violence, including Anna Kochorkian. Do you think there's a bias there? Because what you're seeing is that she is more than happy to not only defund the police, she wants to destroy the police. She's willing to destroy property. She's willing to destroy the memory of someone who died in the line of work. A woman. Because she just wants to destroy that. News media, not going to tell you. They don't want you to know. When it comes to talking about the FBI and the fact that they found that the Capitol Police, the Capitol riot, the protests at the Capitol on January 6th, there is no coordination. That every single Democrat that told you that this was an insurrection, that this was coordinated, that this was an attempt to take over America, lied to you, that they were wrong. Every single one of them. This is as wrong as when they told you about Russia collusion. Do you remember that? 3 years, MSNBC, Rachel Maddow, every night. They're telling you every day. Representative Adam Schiff told you every single day, I have evidence, they had proof, they knew for a fact, and there is no evidence, there is no proof. 4 investigations later, it was a complete lie. The Capitol riots, the Capitol protests, January 6th, this was an insurrection, this was coordinated. They lied. There is no evidence, there is no proof. It did not happen. You are being misled. You are being used. And they don't even want to be honest. They don't want to show you this. The left isn't even covering the story. They don't want you to know. Even as Reuters is neutral. Reuters is trying to get out there. The only people who are trying to tell you this, to say, hey, here's the truth, happens to be on the right. Republicans are telling it. 72% of the coverage, it's coming from the right. It's coming from conservatives and Republicans. The left don't want you to hear a word. Because the left don't believe in fairness. They don't believe in truth. Here it is. Larry Elder. What's going on? Well, this is coming from the LA Times. And the LA Times wants to tell you that Larry Elder, this man, a known black conservative, that Larry Elder isn't black. That guy with that complexion is not black, according to the LA Times. I want you to absorb that for a moment. That man in the picture, Larry Elder, according to writers in the LA Times, they are telling their readers this man is not black because his politics changes his color. They want to tell you that Larry Elder, they are saying Larry Elder is a danger, a clear and present danger, according to Melina Abdullah, guess what? Co-founder of Black Lives Matter in LA. BLM has now defined what is black as being a political preference. Blackness is a political preference. This is the left in America. These are the people you're supposed to trust. These are the people who are supposed to look out for your lives. They're the people who are going to stand there and tell you that your political preferences decide the color of your skin. And by the way, the color of your skin is important on what you can and cannot do in this nation, whether or not you're going to get bonuses and benefits because of the color of your skin. Because everything is about race in America, but only the race they're willing to give you. They're going to assign you a race. If you have the wrong politics, you lose whatever birthright you have. I am not a black Hispanic according to BLM. According to the local chapters of BLM, Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, and Antifa, I am not a black Hispanic. Larry Elder in LA is not considered a black man. Why? Because we have the wrong political viewpoint. And so these small fringe elitists are able to say, well, by the power decreed upon them by themselves, you no longer are black. You no longer have your ethnicity. You are now a generic white male, a straight white male, and that of course means you're the evil devil. You are the devil itself. Because you're an evil, you are a white, straight male. You must be the devil himself, because that is the politics you believe in. Because BLM said so. And these are the same people who are telling you and making the decision that, nope, January 6th, insurrection. They're the same people who said, the autonomous zones across America for a year. No, not there. Those are all, ignore that. Forget it. Don't even think about it. No charges. Killing 8-year-old kids in Atlanta, 16-year-olds in Portland. Don't worry about it. Ignore it. Charges waived. But, these are the people. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine the gall for a writer in, I don't care what newspaper, but this happens to be the LA Times, that they're going to actually point to a black man and tell him that he is dangerous and that he is not black. And by the way, if you think I'm overestimating that I am somehow exaggerating that, this is the article. And by the way, these are from our friends over at Hot Air, John Sexton. But if you're wondering, you can go to the article itself. The reason why I didn't is because I'm not paying the LA Times the money. I'm not going to pay them for that. I'm not having a subscription with them. But this is the article. Like a lot of black people, I've learned that it's often best to ignore people like Larry Elder. People who are, as my dad used to say, skinfolk, but not kinfolk. Indeed, his candidacy feels personal, like an insult to blackness. First of all, what is blackness? It's an insult to blackness. Is blackness a person? Is there a whiteness, a Asianness? Is there an Indianness? Is it an indigenous peopleness? What is that? It doesn't make any sense. What's blackness? It's an insult to blackness. I don't know that blackness can be insulted, but okay, it's an insult to blackness. Who made you the arbiter to decide what is and is not an insult to a group of millions of people? There are millions of black Americans. How do you, one person on the LA Times, get to decide what all 20 million people have to think? What makes you the right to say that Larry Elder isn't black enough? How do you define what is black enough? His politics are not black enough? So when did black people lose the right to be able to think and make their own decisions? And this is important for anyone who isn't black, because if they can tell me that I can only vote a certain way because of the color of my skin, what do you think they're going to tell you next? What do you think they're going to make sure you can do? Well, and we already see this. This is in critical race theory. We see this every day. We see this is being taught to our children as we speak in schools around the nation. They're being told how to hate, and that should upset people. Steve, hello, Steve. I don't think I've seen you on the channel before, but I want to thank you. Steve says January 6th was worse than 9/11. Please explain that, Steve. And I'm more than happy to have you on the program. You can call into the show at 607-242-1582. You can also follow up with a statement on where you're on. You're on YouTube. And no one's going to beat up on you. I'm not here to beat up on you. And I don't want anyone else to beat up on you, Steve. But I want to understand, because I don't believe that. I think that's absolutely wrong. I think that makes no sense to me. And I'm asking you to make it make sense to me, Steve. That's what this show is about. You're telling me that January 6th was worse than September 11th. We lost thousands of Americans on September 11th. We have hundreds of individuals who are dying because of asbestos, if not thousands. We have hundreds of people who lost businesses and lost their employment. We've had devastating consequences that have cost billions of, millions of dollars, that have a chain that 20 years later are still affecting this nation. Let me ask you, Steve, so you're saying that an experience, an event that has had a chain reaction for 20 years, where individuals in the thousands died, and you're going to tell me that January 6th is worse? How? Again, I'm not picking on you. I'm not beating up on you. I'm asking you to explain. I just want to understand. How? January 6th did not cost more money. January 6th did not kill more people. January 6th was not a terrorist action. We have numerous, and I have already made it very clear, there are multiple events I can show you throughout the United States for the last 6-7 months that are far, far worse in its scope and actions. And we already have the FBI report that is absolutely identifying that this was not organized, that this was not an attempt to take over the country. Please, Steve, explain to me. You gave me one sentence. January 6th was worse than 9/11. Explain that. Call in 607-242-1582. Call in. Tell me why it's worse. I'm not going to pick on you. I just want to hear your answer. In the meantime, Dow mentions the cognitive dissonance embedded in identity politics. There is a lot of that. Dow goes on to say, regardless, speaking truth and fact has become an ultimate form of civil disobedience, and until there is a wave of litigation and lawmaking that regulate those that try to gag those rights, censorship will be a norm. The narrative that the media has published has tried to liken the actions of January 6th were worse than 9/11. Well, Dow, Steve just said it was worse. And I'm trying to understand how. Because I can show you the consequences. I can show you how, I can explain how we get from BLM The BLM movement, and I can show you a straight line that goes BLM to Larry Elder isn't white, isn't black. And that I can show you how the LA Times supports BLM and hates Republicans and conservatives, especially if they happen to be black. There's a straight line there. I can show you that. I can explain that in a heartbeat. It ain't hard. What I can't do is explain how 9/11 is less than January 6th. And I've yet to hear, I've heard several of the very same leftists, and I'm not saying that about you, Steve, but many of the same progressives out there that will tell me, well, this is so much worse. Can't explain to me how is it worse. How is it worse? It's not worse in terms of the number of lives lost. It's not worse in terms of the function of our government. It's not worse in terms of cost. It's not worse in terms of business or the economy. How is it worse? I don't understand. I don't understand. It's so much worse for the government. Really? Because Biden is sitting in the Oval Office, right? And he did that, and there was no one who stopped him. Okay, so it's so much worse. Please explain it. I understand the parroted line. That's a line that is being pushed by the left-wing media. Explain it. Because every time I ask the far left or progressives or even independents that use these lines that they have heard on CNN and MSNBC, two of the least reliable news agencies in America, and when they hear that and then they quote it back to us, and I ask them, and how? How is that the case? Give me the evidence of what is worse. And they can't do it. And then they get pissed off because I'm a racist, as they tell me. They then say, well, Mike, you're a racist, and therefore that's why you don't understand. I'm like, you haven't explained it. That's why I don't understand. And I'm not telling you, you have to agree with me. But I wanted to be clear. The left is not being clear with you. Here it comes. Daily Newswire, one of the few organizations that was actually bold enough to let people know this. ABC News appears to have not aired 900 words from the Biden interview on Good Morning America with George Stephanopoulos. This is, by the way, this is from Good Morning America. This is the transcript that was released by ABC News. This was released by Good Morning America and George Stephanopoulos. And you're not being told about this. The left, MSNBC, CNN, they are avoiding this. They did mention, oh, there was a sentence that was edited. No. It wasn't a sentence. They're trying to minimize the story. They're trying to obfuscate the story. They don't want you to understand what is being said here. There was like 7, 8 minutes, maybe 10 minutes of conversation that got taken out. Imagine you have a conversation with someone for 45 minutes and then someone else, they recorded that and they only play back 15. They chopped it up and they didn't just take out one whole section. They took out parts in between what you were saying. Let me explain this to you. And please share this with your friends because they're not going to believe you. This is from Good Morning America. This is from ABC News. This is their transcript. This is the transcript they provided and released by ABC News. Here we go. So Biden, see this? Everything that's not in bold, that's what they showed the American people. Everything that you see in bold, this is the stuff that they didn't tell you, that they didn't let you hear, that they hid from you. There's an entire question and answer about Iraq, Russia, China, completely disappears. This whole question, this whole subject disappears. Look at this, Biden's answers. They just took out an entire chunk of his answer about and then they took out the follow-up question. This is about what was going on in Afghanistan. This is about the cost and what's happening and the consequences of it. Not only did they take out part of Joe Biden's answer, they then killed the follow-up answer, completely removed. The follow-up question and the follow-up answer, gone, disappeared. You don't get to see that. But that's not the part that really upsets me. Even though, look at this whole section. This whole section. They just wiped it all out. It doesn't exist. You don't get to hear any of it. But that's not the worst part. Here is the worst part. George Stephanopoulos. Are you confident we're going to have that in Afghanistan? Doesn't matter why. Here's the thing that's important. This is Joe Biden's answer. And in the middle of Joe Biden's answer, they take out his words. They cut out the middle of his answer. They edited the context and the words. They edited not just the context, the content. They changed the meaning of what was being said to the American people. And if you think that's bad, and I mean, if you think that's bad, they went on to literally edit an entire sentence. Here is a sentence, a thought from Joe Biden to the American people, and they went in and they literally took out the middle of a sentence. Tens of thousands of American forces in Afghanistan when we have North Africa and Western Africa. They went in and took out what's going on around the world in the Middle East and North Africa and North Africa and Western Africa. They took that out. They literally are chopping up his words. They are literally taking out the context of what he is saying and the content of what he is saying and the responses by the news media. I'm not going to tell you that George Stephanopoulos is the most upstanding newsman that's ever existed. I'm not. He's a Clinton advisor. He was big in the Clinton administration. He then went into the news media. He is biased as hell. He's all into the left. And he works for ABC News, a left-leaning organization. I'm not going to tell you that he's some kind of straight shooter. And even then, given that, they are editing his content and they are dropping out questions he asked. Follow up. You know what? When you don't have a strong, independent news media individual journalist, and you're editing his weak questions because that's too much and too strong and too negative for Joe Biden, then that is a problem. I don't care if you're a Democrat or not. You can be an independent, libertarian, a conservative, right wing. No, if the president is being edited in content and context, there is a problem. That is not news media. That is a propaganda agency. That is a deception against the American people. And I don't care if that happened to Reagan, if it happened to Bush, if it happened to Trump, I would be standing here and saying the same thing to you and telling you this is a problem. The media has screwed up. This is wrong. You have never heard Fox News. You have never seen anyone on the right do it. I've never heard of anyone on the left doing it before. But now they are literally chopping up the words, chopping up the content. They are making their own message. Do you remember that movie, Live and Die Free in America, Die Hard 4? And remember there was that scene in Die Hard 4 where the terrorists put out this message on the internet, and it's just all these different presidents saying a word or two here and there. That is now Joe Biden on ABC News. That is Joe Biden on ABC News. He is a puppet, and they are just stringing together a bunch of words and making their own sentences and making their own context and meaning and answers to their own questions. This is an experiment in seeing how they can manipulate the news media and the public. This has nothing to do with freedom. And the left should be all over this. The rest of the left-leaning media should be screaming about this. Because this isn't journalism. This is propaganda. They're making up their own news. They're making up their own answers to the questions into what they want it to be. That's terrifying. Because that means you are being manipulated massively. Dow mentions that one way that January 6th was as bad as 9/11 in the sense that the curtailing of freedoms of the American people were affected by the Patriot Act and the propaganda from the left and neocons about safety. I can see that argument. I can see that. And if that's what Steve meant, okay. Yes, it's been absolutely horrendous on the way that government has used January 6th, like 9/11, to take away the rights of American citizens, to demonize Americans, and to micromanage our lives under the pretense that the government will protect you. Meanwhile, that same government is rewriting the words of our president, of Joe Biden, into whatever it is that they think will work, to whatever they want for their message. He's a puppet. He's worse than a puppet. He really is. He's worse than Pinocchio. And if you think I'm wrong, I'm happy to hear it. Greg mentions, we will always survive. We have the most important ingredient, each other. How? You are a Marine. Improvise. I agree. We definitely do improvise. Adapt, improvise, overcome. Go through it, around it, over it. You will find a way. I understand that. But part of being able to do that is to understand the situation and the nature of the situation that we are in. And Greg, and I thank you, by the way, Greg, for being here and being on the program. I'm not sure how much the internet overlords are interfering with everyone being able to see this. But I'll tell you, it's like the interview I did yesterday with Eric Caron, a former U.S. diplomat, a former senior official in DHS, Department of Homeland Security. As we're talking about this, most people don't see the consequences of what's going on. They don't see that because Biden has turned on our allies in Afghanistan, Taiwan is now terrified, and China is emboldened. That North Korea is emboldened to attack South Korea. People aren't noticing that. They're not North Vietnam versus South Vietnam. Japan's now in danger. All of our European allies are terrified of what's going to happen from Russia. These are all consequences that came from Joe Biden's action. And if most people don't know that, and if we can't speak about that, how are you going to fix it? Dow mentions that almost feel a bit of sympathy for Biden, how much of it is his own inability to control himself, and how much of it's him being abused by his handlers. Do I have sympathy for Joe Biden and his mental illness? Of course. I can sympathize with that. Do I feel bad that he is in control of our government? Far, far more so. I feel bad for the American people. Because I understand, Joe, somewhere in Joe's mind, he may think he's doing the right thing. He may think that this is the best way to go forward. It's obviously not. The consequences of what he is doing to our economy, look at the inflation, look at what's happening to jobs long term, look at the future, the devaluing of our money. That's a problem. That's horrible. It's horrendous. It's destructive. If you look at human rights and personal rights, that's destructive. It's terrible. And how is it empowering other people? I mean, I want you to see. This is from the left. This is from the Daily News. George Takei, who is a very well-known activist. He's, he used to play Sulu on Star Trek. And he has recently come out and said The willfully unvaccinated who wind up in hospitals from COVID should not receive priority medical care over other very sick or injured people who are as much in need of urgent care, medical care, which is really interesting. He's saying he's willing to see people die. Because people didn't do what he wanted, they should die. Because George Takei is the same kind of, well, I can't curse here, but he's the same kind of person as the person who says that this man isn't black. George Takei is the same kind of far left activist who has blinders on, who only sees the world in one way. And if you don't do what George Takei wants, if you don't do what the LA Times wants you to do, if you are different in any kind of way, then you are evil and they are just the saints trying to keep the world alive. They're trying to do the right thing. George Takei is trying to help you. George, you have nothing to do with my personal health care. You don't have anything to do with the medical information of millions of Americans. He's not a doctor. He's an actor. He's an actor who's only famous for playing a space traveler. That's it. He was a lesser character in a TV show about traveling through space. He was the equivalent of an ensign, a navigator. Okay, and he was a good actor. I'm not going to question that. That's his claim to fame. Wonderful. His claim to fame is he's gay and he was in that show. Fantastic. Neither of those things equal a medical degree. Neither of those things gives him more information about my personal health care and my personal decisions. And he should never get that. He doesn't deserve that right. He doesn't have that right. And he shouldn't be trying to guide medical policy based on his personal feelings that have no substantiation in fact. Especially when he's doing the same thing that's being done to Larry Elder in saying, well, you're just not worth it. You're not good enough. You're not what I want you to be. And therefore, you should just die. And that should scare people. And do you notice the theme here? Because we're seeing this repeated over and over again. We have the United States, 535 American citizens have relatively disappeared because they didn't agree with the political opinion of Democratic and progressive elites. We have Larry Elder doesn't agree with the mandated position from the far left on what it is to be black. And because BLM, Black Lives Matter of LA, does not like the political preference of Larry Elder, an individual who gets to make his own choices in a free America, they have now stripped him, or they are attempting to strip him of his birthright of the color of skin he was born with that you can see in a picture just as easily as I can. And now we have George Takei with no medical, and he has no medical degree, no knowledge about medicine any greater than anyone else, and he is trying to guide policy on how individuals, he's willing to let people die because his personal preference is not your preference. Do you see how these things come together? And when you have a weak leader like Joe Biden, he is a weak leader. I don't think anyone can argue this at this point. I do not think this can be argued at this point in America. You cannot say that Joe Biden is a strong leader looking at what is going on in America right this moment on August 22nd. He is not a strong leader, not even close to a strong leader. He's struggling to make it up to the levels of being a weak leader. I mean, he and Jimmy Carter are right about neck and neck in terms of being complete failures. And Jimmy Carter is winning. Jimmy Carter is looking better. And I know for a lot of people who are younger, they have no idea who Jimmy Carter is. Look him up. You'll see. Really horrible president. Nice man in terms of his giving. Very, very religious, very willing to help his common man. absolute horrible leader. Joe Biden doesn't even have that. Dow mentions totally agree. Sympathy for his health condition, not for Joe Biden's health condition, not excusing the destructiveness of his and his party's policies. Dow goes on to say, it's ironic. This is coming from George Takei. He supposedly remembers the Japanese internment camps. He, of all people, should recognize the dangers of marginalizing a portion of the population, and yet he is doing it. Just like the LA Times, marginalized, they are more than willing. Their politics comes before everything else. I'm showing it to you. They are willing, we are seeing from ABC News, they are willing to edit the comments of the president, to cut it up and re-put and put it together and change it in front of your face because, well, that's what they feel like they should do. And we see that, you know, entertainers, actors, people who have, he's an entertainer. That's not really important at all, quite honestly. Here he is telling people how they should live and die based on his feelings about their medical information, their medical histories. The LA Times is trying to define the blackness of a black man because they don't like his politics. This should terrify you, folks. And this isn't isolated to George Takei. This isn't isolated to the LA Times. According to the New Republic, on August 16th, which you probably didn't hear about, there's an idea running around from people like George Takei that you should pay more for health insurance, depending on whether or not you're vaccinated. And you should be very upset about that. Because imagine, if they're going to make you pay more money whether or not you're vaccinated, are they going to make you pay more because you're a conservative, or maybe you're a libertarian, or maybe are they going to make you pay more because you're an independent? Are they going to make you pay more because you're white or black? Are they going to make you pay more because you're straight? Are they going to make you pay more because you're one of the 32 genders and not the male and female? If you can start picking on people to arbitrarily say, you're going to pay more because I don't agree with what you have to say. I don't agree with your politics. So you get to pay more and you get to pay less. And that's your favoritism coming out. That is your political bargaining. That is how people die in the world. It's a death sentence for God knows how many people in so many different ways. And we should be upset about that. And you probably have not heard about that at all. You probably have not heard that. But we should. We should. Because every time we hear from these individuals, give me 1 second, Dal, I'm going to come right back to you. But when we hear these guys and they're making up these stories and they're getting this all wrong, it's affecting our lives. Remember, we were told we have to save the environment. Global warming, global cooling, global starvation. One of those stories, now they call it climate change. We have to save the world. We have like 6 years left. We have 6 minutes left before the world is going to end. And that's why you need to stop using a gas car and you need to get an electric car. And by the way, your electric car is going to blow up and burn. Oh, you didn't know that? Yeah. CBS News. No one's talking on this subject. August 21st, 2021 came out at 5:21 p.m. In the middle of the weekend, CBS News puts out the information that GM is recalling the Chevy Bolt. And this is one of several recalls of electric cars that are burning down. And if you have a Chevy Bolt, please, please, please park it outside of your house so it doesn't burn down your house. And they are recalling these. They are recalling the cars from before 2019 all the way through 2022. More than 130,000 cars are being recalled because they're electric cars and they're going to burn down your house. But you have to have an electric car because global warming. Because Joe Biden, the brilliant guy that he is, Joe Biden said, you have to own an electric car. Because he's so smart that they're editing his words. They are rewriting what he is saying on the fly. And that brilliant genius, Joe Biden, decided you have to have an electric car, and those electric cars are now burning down people's houses. Because he had a feeling, just like George Takei wants to see you die if you don't believe in having the same medical treatments that he personally likes. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger says, you don't have any freedom. And just like the LA Times tells you, can decide whether or not you happen to be whatever ethnic group you are, whether you're black, white, Hispanic, it's up to them to decide. NBLM. Sorry, left out NBLM. For those that may not remember, Dow mentions, for those that may not remember, there was a movement within the medical community to hold life-saving medical procedures hostage from smokers because they're a demographic that participates in, quote, self-destructive, quote, behavior. It's not a new thing. We hear this all the time. There's always a group of extremists who are willing to kill people who do not believe in what they believe. And we keep seeing this, and this almost always, at least in my lifetime, last 53 years, and actually far, far longer, we keep seeing this from the progressives and the leftists, the far left. They will kill you to get their goals. Their goals are more important than your life. This is like when we hear Arnold Schwarzenegger say that screw your freedoms. His beliefs, his political ideals are more important than your freedom. George Takei's feelings are more important than your freedoms and your life. Joe Biden's impressions, his thoughts about his and AOC's thoughts about the climate are more important than whether or not your house burns down. So, Dow goes on to say electric cars would be a great idea if battery technology had advanced at the same rate as other technology, which it has absolutely not. Corporations have slowed introduction of mass-produced battery innovation because of cuts in profit. Well, Dow, remember, solar energy has always been a problem. See, they love to tell you the answer is solar energy. Part of the reason why solar energy doesn't work, and it doesn't work. Ask Michael Moore. Look at his documentary, Planet of the Humans, and many, many others who are just as accredited, but I'm using a left-leaning source here. The fact is, it doesn't work. Part of the reason why it doesn't work, besides the problems with the transmission lines, besides the problem with trying to capture the sunlight properly and accumulate it and focus it to be able to transfer it into electricity, is the storage, because the batteries suck. We have been working on that for 80 years. 80 years we have been working. The concept of a solar cell, we had that 60, 70 years ago. This is not new science. The fact is, everything else about that doesn't work. It's not efficient at making the transition. It is not efficient at transferring the energy along the transmissions lines. It is not efficient at storing it. The batteries don't work. They never have. And Garth mentions the batteries from the cars will be as much of a problem as the blades of windmills. Exactly. Which require rare earth metals, which, hey, guess what? One of the second largest locations, or maybe it's the third largest location in the world, is in Afghanistan. Which is why China is making deals with them as we speak. But the windmills, yeah, the blades come off. They don't biodegrade. You got to bury them. They're not efficient. They freeze. This is the same problem. And again, the batteries are a problem. Batteries are a problem for solar power, for wind power, and for cars. And they don't work. And by the way, batteries don't last forever. What happens when your car 10 years down the road, because you happen to live, and they tell you Oh, these things will last for 25, 30 years. Did you ever go through the winter in the Northeast or in the Midwest? Have you ever been through a cold winter? Have you ever been in the South during the heat of the summer? Batteries don't last that long. It doesn't work. They don't have that lifetime. Their lifetime they're quoting is if you live in the perfect environment, like in Arizona, just on the edge of the desert in Arizona, on a cloudy day in spring, and if you live in those conditions 24 hours a day, every day, then yes, the battery will last 25 years. If you live in the rest of the real world, then it's not going to last that long. At all. Not even close. And that's without assuming that they're going to blow up and burn on you. As CBS reported, at the end of the night, on a Saturday, knowing that you aren't going to pay attention to it. And no one else decided to talk about the story. Yeah, the efficiency of Dow mentions that the efficiency is about 35% for the batteries. It's kind of like ethanol, which they stopped talking about because ethanol poisons the ocean. It kills fish. It's destructive. It kills more of the environment than it helps. But ethanol is only 75% as effective as gas. It's less effective than gas. You need more ethanol to get the same effect that you would from gas. Gas is therefore more efficient. You need less of it, and there is less pollution because you can get more done. They're just not efficient. But ethanol is a mandate in the United States, and it's a growing mandate. And yes, it is called deoxygenation of the Gulf of Mexico. We are destroying it. We are killing fish. We are killing plankton. We are destroying the global, the waterways because we're stripping out the oxygen. And that's a byproduct of making ethanol gas with corn as the United States does. That is a fact. It is not an opinion. It is not a question. It has been proven by many scientists around the world. No one likes to talk about it. I found out about that back in 2007 when I was working for a company and doing the research on it. It is a known fact. They are more than happy to destroy this planet, lying to you and not telling you the consequences of their actions. Use ethanol. It's great. It's not effective. You need to buy more ethanol than you need gas, and it's destroying the Gulf of Mexico. Use a battery. Solar power is fantastic. Doesn't work. Hasn't worked for 70 years. Oh, use wind. Doesn't work. Hasn't ever worked. Don't worry. We'll use electric cars. They blow up in your houses. Don't worry, don't tell anyone. No one will notice. Does that not scare you, folks? How many subjects are we watching the left-leaning progressive ideology? And I'm not saying this doesn't happen on the right, but case after case after case, I don't find these cases on the right. If they were there, I'd be screaming at them. I have no problem telling the right when they are wrong, and I have done it in the past. I will do it in the future. I have no problem saying that this Republican, this conservative has screwed up, that this is a bad policy. It doesn't work for America. I have no problem saying that. But we are seeing over and over and over again, not only the policies, but the thinking that brings these policies forward is a problem. They want to put electric cars in your house, except the electric cars continue, and this has been true since the beginning, since they first created electric cars. They continuously continue to burn and blow up. Their solar is not as efficient. Wind is not consistent. Nuclear is, but not try and get something nuclear built with the left in charge. You're not going to have it. Ethanol, they want to mandate ethanol and not care about the fact that it's destroying the very environment they're saying they want to save. This is a problem. Garth mentions that there was a test hydrogen-powered Ford truck. I thought hydrogen-powered trucks were a thing. That is an issue that they've been working on. But as I recall, they were also prone, because of the hydrogen, there was a problem with the mix, and it could cause, in an accident, an explosion because of the hydrogen gas. And I'm not sure that they had resolved that, which is probably why we aren't hearing much about it. If I remember that correctly, it has been a while since we've heard something said about that. But again, I want you to take this all into context, because I'm not spinning conspiracy theories here. I'm giving you sources. I'm giving you the information. I am showing you the left-leaning news media and their reports, the information that they are providing to you. And I'm simply asking you a question. If they're getting this wrong, if they are misleading you in these cases, as we can see, as there is proof for this, why are we not asking questions? Oh, hang on 1 second, folks. 1 second. Oh. Nope, that's all right. Yeah. Sorry, I have some maintenance that's going to happen in a second. In another half hour. So, this is troubling. This is highly troubling. And I wish I could say that this is the worst of the problem. It isn't. Because on August 10th, did you see this? On August 10th, Black Lives Matters. They came out and they said that, make no mistake, they're talking about the Senate Democrats, that just a couple of hours ago, every Senate Democrat, this is the United States Senate, voted with Republicans on an amendment for the infrastructure and budget that would eliminate federal funding for local governments that defund the police. That's right. That there was an amendment that was being attached to the Joe Biden $1 trillion infrastructure deal that doesn't actually do anything for the infrastructure. And there was a rider on it, an amendment that said there would be, it's a non-binding statement that said the federal government shouldn't give money to any city that defunded the police. There was no law on that. It's not binding. And the Democrats were laughing about it. In fact, Cory Booker laughed about it. We covered it on this show. And BLM says, make no mistake, this is a universal attempt to silence the demands from the streets. By the way, 71% of Americans want to have as much or more police than exists at this moment. Fully 65% of Black Americans, whenever polled, in every single poll that has been taken on this, want to have the same amount or more police. A significant majority of all Americans, regardless of the color of their skin, want to have the same or more police in every single poll. And in every one of the 22 cities that have defunded the police, the public, Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, everyone is turning around and saying they need to hire more police to replace the police they defunded because crime has gone up exponentially in many places. So BLM is telling you, make no mistake, this is a universal attempt to silence the demands from the street. There are no demands from the street. There are demands from political offices. There are demands from the socialists who are trying to gain power. BLM goes on to say, this is an attempt to put our movement in check, the BLM movement. You would ask yourself, why would that have to be there? Because BLM says you must defund the police. No one, they go on to say, no one, we repeat, no one had the back of our revolutionary movement in the Senate. By the way, when they say no one, they're talking about Cory Booker. Senator Cory Booker, who happens to be Black and who laughed about this amendment and about the fact that they should defund the police. And they just threw Cory Booker under a bus. BLM doesn't think that Cory Booker is acting black enough. Just like Larry Elder in the LA Times saying, well, no, Larry Elder, he's not black enough for them. Now Cory Booker, who is on the left, who is a far leftist, is not left enough for BLM. You know, and this is because they want you to get out there and say, well, you got to support defunding the police, even though every single example in America, and I dare BLM or anyone to show me any evidence, there has been no evidence, I've looked at it all to date, that shows any city that has defunded the police, any of them, there's 22, not one has not had a dramatic, if not exponential, increase in crime and homicides. And this is what BLM wants you to do. Who are they trying to help? Because they're trying to enforce that if you don't do what they say, if you don't do this, you're not black. If you're not doing what they're telling you to do, you're not black. Just like Larry Elder. He's not black because the LA Times said so. And you're not black because you're not defunding the police. I like that. Dow says that the far left opened the Overton window and chucked that baby out with the bath water. Kinda. Yeah. You know, it's like, you know what, I want you guys to think of something. You know who else isn't black? You know who else isn't black? I'll tell you. This guy. This happens to be Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin for the United States. And I bet my bottom dollar that the left, they don't think that he's black either. Besides the fact that he works for the United States government. Besides the fact that he works for the the Defense Department. Besides the fact that he's in charge of that and the complete fiasco that has gone on in Afghanistan under his watch, and the fact that he can't guarantee that the United States can get American citizens out of Kabul, as the British are paratrooping in soldiers getting the British out of Kabul, even as the French are sending in their commandos and getting the French out of Kabul. This Mr. Lloyd Austin doesn't know what to do. But he is definitely on the left. And we know this because here it is from the BBC News that the U.S. tells people to avoid the Kabul airport amidst the report of a crush. This is from the BBC. I want you to watch this.
Scrambling to leave Afghanistan via the capital's airport. In the midst of the chaos, the US has now advised its citizens to avoid travelling to Kabul airport unless they have individual instructions to do so. Meanwhile, the man considered to be the political leader of the Taliban, Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar, arrived in...
Well,
make mornings...
I don't care about that. Okay, so, did you hear that? That was the British news. The American government telling you, don't go. What are these American citizens supposed to do? Where are they supposed to go? And remember, they've got no time frame where they will become safe because, hello, according to, yes, The Independent, another bit of news. Do you notice that the left doesn't like telling you the reality of the situation? They don't want you to see this. Look at this. This is an article from The Independent, which is a left-leaning newspaper, international, that it is. 12% of the left is circulating this. They just do not want you to see this. That's MSNBC, CNN, NBC News, ABC News, CBS. They don't want to tell you about this. They don't want you to realize that the Taliban has over 2,000 armored vehicles, over 40 aircraft, that's including helicopters like the Black Hawk helicopter. In fact, and this is according to Politico, very much on the left. No one wants to cover this story. It's not being distributed. Since 2003, the United States provided in Afghanistan 600,000 light weapons like the M16 M4 and 76,000 vehicles and night vision goggles. Hold on one moment, folks. I'll be right back with you. All right, sorry about that, folks. As it turns out, there was some technicians. They were a little bit early by about an hour, so that's throwing me off, and I'm about to lose my signal. And I want you, so what I will do is I will say, there are many problems here, and I'm going to keep the links, as always, in the instructions, in the description. If you found this to be interesting, informative, useful, please do like, share, subscribe. Come back next Sunday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I know there's football. I know there's so many other things to try and distract you, but I appreciate when I get to hear from each and every one of you. That means Dal, that means Garth, that means Steve, that means all the ladies as they called in, Greg Vinton. I want to say thank you to Susanna, to, of course, Christina, and to, I'm missing somebody, Anne as well, and so many others. I thank you all for checking us out, for being part of this program. And don't worry, we're not done. We're going to keep this government honest. We're going to try and make the news media honest, and we thank you for your support in that effort. We'll talk to you again very soon.